Chapter 4 Tension Points.
Despite it being a Saturday, Noelle woke up early the next morning. She'd hoped for the chance to sleep in, but Kris's arbitrary 10 a.m. appointment time had ruled that out. And anyway, after being awoken by her now routine nightmares, her odds of getting back to sleep again were low. She contemplated simply staying home. It would serve Kris right to be stood up after the way they had carelessly broken her watch, but their commanding words kept echoing in her head.
Don't lose track of time.
She didn't want to turn up later for the study session and have to explain her absence to them. And besides, she had to admit she was curious. Apprehensive, yes, but curious. It sounded like Kris had something planned for her today, and maybe if she found out what that was, she would be closer to understanding their strange behavior of late. They told her they only wanted to help her. It was only fair that she gave them a chance to do so. So, her mind made up, she rolled out of bed and dressed herself in her usual fall outfit. A warm, reddish-brown sweater vest over a clean white shirt and a dark green skirt. As a final touch, she put the broken watch on her wrist.
Just because it's cracked doesn't mean I can't wear it. Maybe Kris will notice and apologize.
On her way downstairs to the kitchen, she poked her head into her mother's office. Mayor Holliday didn't keep office hours at City Hall on the weekends, but she never stopped working. With the amount of time her mother spent with her nose buried in paperwork, emails, and phone calls, Noelle sometimes thought that it would be more efficient to either relocate City Hall into their house, or else move the family into City Hall. She wouldn't have thought that being mayor of such a small, sleepy town would require so much attention, day in and day out, but her mother always found a way to prioritize working over parenting. This morning was no exception. When Noelle stopped by to say good morning, her mom hardly even glanced up from her computer.
You're up early for a weekend, Noelle. Decided to be productive and seize the day by the antlers?
She said this like it was a welcome but unexpected occurrence. Noelle, who had long since learned that taking her mother's passive-aggressive bait wasn't worth it, held her tongue and explained,
I'm going to Kris's house this morning to study with them. We have a group project for school.
Her mother looked at her now, but it was a look of skeptical disapproval. If Mayor Holliday ever had a portrait painted of her, it would probably be wearing that look.
Just you and Kris?
Noelle fought the urge to roll her eyes.
No, actually. Another girl from our class is in our group too. But, Mom, I've been hanging out alone with Kris for how many years now? My whole life. They're practically family.
Well, you weren't teenagers for most of those years,
her mother said crisply.
And that kid has always been a strange one. All those morbid pranks they used to play on you when you were younger. I can't count the number of times you came crying to me because of something Kris did. Mom, that was ages ago. They've grown up a lot since then. Well, I would hope so. Just stay in town and be home before dark tonight. It's not safe out there right now. I'll be fine. What's there to be afraid of in hometown of all places?
Her mother gave her a sour look.
You tell me, Noelle. I'm sure you know more about what goes on in this town than I do. I'm only its mayor, after all. Okay.
Noelle said, backing out of the office.
I'll have my cell if you need to check on me.
Not that you will. You'll probably forget I exist as soon as this conversation ends.
Oh, and give my regards to Toriel.
Her mother said, her attention returned to her computer screen.
Lovely woman. I don't know how she does it, raising 2 kids with no support from that fool of an ex-husband of hers.
Noelle didn't bother pointing out that one of those kids was off at college now, or that Kris still spent some days with Asgore.
Sure, Mom. I'll tell her you said hi. You should take some notes from her if you admire her so much. Honestly, I wish you were more like Kris's mom.
Her mom didn't say anything else, so Noelle quietly retreated to the kitchen, feeling frustrated. It felt like she couldn't have a single conversation with her mother without feeling frustrated or embarrassed or just small. She scanned the fridge, passing over the frozen pizzas she had microwaved for dinner the previous night. It had given her an upset stomach. She finally settled on waffles. Waffles were comfort food, and she felt in need of some of that. As she ate her waffles, extra maple syrup, she'd always had a sweet tooth or two, She did her usual daily web search on her phone, more out of habit than any real hope, for December holiday. No new results, at least none that weren't just about Christmas. Noelle sighed sadly, feeling very lonely in the empty kitchen. She missed the family meals they'd used to have, back when it was a full complement of her and her parents and her sister. But after death, it was like her mom didn't even want to look at Noelle anymore. She would have thought losing one child would make her mother hold on to the other more tightly, as though Noelle were precious to her. But instead her mom had seemed to reject all emotional attachments and had walled herself off behind her job. Noelle was just a thing to be managed now, like the mayor managed everything else in Hometown. So long as she was staying out of trouble and getting good grades in school, her mom didn't care what else was going on with her. Her dad had never had that problem. She could actually talk to him about stuff. But with him stuck in the hospital for weeks now, there was very little cheer in the holiday home. She stuffed the rest of her breakfast in her mouth and chewed it as she washed her plate in the sink, suddenly feeling determined to not spend a second longer in that house than she had to.
Whatever Kris wants, at least they actually need me for something.
The late autumn morning was brisk and a little shivery in a way that Noelle normally loved, but the chill she'd been feeling inside her made it hard to enjoy the weather. Even bundled up in her coziest sweater, she could feel goosebumps on her skin, and she missed the sensation of warmth. A thought popped into her head, so obvious that she hadn't really considered it.
Maybe I'm sick.
She didn't feel unhealthy aside from the chill, but it was hard to tell with these things. Her dad had been feeling okay too until he wasn't. That thought frightened her, so she shook her head and tried to clear the anxious cobwebs from it.
It's some residual Dark World thing, that's all. I'll ask Kris about it. They probably know what's wrong with me.
When she arrived at the cemetery, she found Kris sitting casually, and rather disrespectfully, she thought, on Gerson Boone's tombstone. They were wearing a backpack and kicking their legs in the air, but they hopped down when they saw her coming.
Noelle, finally. I was getting bored out of my school. This place is so dead in the mornings.
She didn't return their self-amused grin.
You've been talking to that guy at the convenience store too much.
That skeleton guy? Nah, that guy's annoying. I'd just as soon keep my distance.
Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Noelle extended her arms questioningly, then dropped them limply to her sides.
I'm here. What did you want to come out here for?
Oh, see. I can't show you here.
They hopped the short fence behind the graves and faced the trees beyond.
Follow me.
She reluctantly clambered over the fence, somewhat less gracefully than Kris, it was harder to do in a skirt than in jeans, and followed them into the forest, letting them lead a healthy distance ahead of her. The forest floor didn't really feature what you'd call a path, and the woods had grown a bit wilder than she remembered since the last time she'd come this way, so while Kris forged straight ahead, she cautiously picked her way through the undergrowth. Leaves crunched satisfyingly under her hooves, but the thick blanket could be deceptive. A couple times she almost tripped over a concealed root or put her hoof in a half-hidden hole in the dirt, but Kris didn't stop to wait up for her. When she fell behind, they just called excitedly over their shoulder.
Come on.
Or,
Keep up, Noelle.
finally they arrived at a clearing, a circular break in the trees where the ground was flat and even, just dirt and leaves. A few log stumps had been arranged as seats in a circle in the middle of a clearing, in the center of which someone had long ago constructed a makeshift fire pit. The sight of the place brought back memories. Azriel starting a small blaze with his fire magic, Kris eating marshmallows from the bag while the others roasted theirs on sticks, Des telling creepy ghost stories, and Kris laughing at Noelle's visible signs of fear, until her sister silenced them with a withered look and a truncated end to the story.
And then the monster ate Kris Dreamer, and their last thought was, I wish I had been nicer to Noelle!
So many memories of so many late nights with friends and family, dreamers and holidays laughing together under the stars. But now, in the daylight, the place looked barren and smaller than she remembered, and the memories felt so long ago as to practically be dreams. She shivered in the morning breeze.
I don't get it, Kris. Why are we here?
Kris shrugged out of their backpack, leaving it propped against a stump and looking around the quiet, empty clearing.
Because it's secluded. out of the way, no one around to disturb us, so I thought it would be the perfect spot to train.
She frowned.
Train? Train what?
You, of course.
I don't.
She felt herself tensing up automatically, like she always did.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Kris smirked at the baffled look on her face.
I'm talking about your magic, Noelle. What did you think I meant?
My magic?
Yeah, spells. Those fun tricks you do with ice.
She shook her head.
No, I can't do that. I'm not magical.
Sure you are.
Kris insisted.
You're an ice mage, and a low-level healer, I should add. Do you think that all that power came from the Dark World? It doesn't work that way. The Dark World only manifests what you take into it. The source of your magic is inside you.
Inside me?
She repeated, wrapping her head around the words.
Like a soul?
Kris grinned.
You can do a lot of things with a strong enough soul.
Then you mean this cold I've been feeling all the time inside my body?
Kris nodded, seeming unsurprised, though she hadn't mentioned it to them before.
That's the magic. Your time in the Dark World must have awoken something in you. Your potential, you could say. Here, let me show you.
They approached her and took her arm, turning her hand palm up and rolling up her sleeve, and in a daze of curious wonder, she didn't pull away. Kris put their hand just under her shoulder and slowly moved it down the length of her arm. Their hand was shockingly warm against her cold skin, making her arm tingle. It felt nice, gentle, and soothing, and she was slightly embarrassed to find herself wondering how Susie's scaly hand would feel making the same gesture along her arm. Kris stopped when they got to her wrist, covering their palm over the spot at the base of her hand where her heartbeat pulsed.
There, you feel that? The cold beating inside you, that's the magic.
I thought I was sick. That there was something seriously wrong with me.
She stood there for a moment, transfixed by her awareness of her own heartbeat and how fast its rhythm had grown. Finally, she swallowed and said gingerly,
You can, let go now.
Kris kept holding her by the wrist, though now their attention seemed caught by her hand.
Your finger,
They said.
it's swollen.
They took her ring finger and the fingers of their other hand, straightening it, looking at it closely as they brushed their thumb across the mess of raw scratches and puncture marks. Noelle gasped, wincing as the pain flared up in response to their touch, and yanked her hand away.
It's not healing.
She admitted, clutching her hand to her chest.
Some wounds don't,
Kris said impassively.
but you'll stop feeling the pain after a while. It's a small price to pay for power.
Says the person not paying it.
She muttered, and then froze, shocked that she had talked back that way. If Kris had been her mother, a comment like that would have gotten her grounded for the rest of the weekend. She had to resist the urge to clamp her hand over her mouth. Kris was looking at her sharply, and though she could barely meet their eye, when she did, she saw a flash of something there. Something red, but no, it must have been a trick of the light. The sun shining on their face, that was all. After a long, tense second, Kris smiled slightly and turned to their backpack leaning against the stump.
So, I thought we could start small, just to see what you can do outside the Dark World. The magic will be harder to access, but I'm confident you have it in you.
They took out a tall glass soda bottle and set it carefully on the flat stump.
See if you can freeze this for me.
Noelle stared at the bottle for a few long seconds. It was silly, but if she squinted, the simple inanimate object began to look almost humanoid. She swallowed roughly.
I don't think I want to.
Kris's face was black and their eyes dark.
Noelle, don't be boring. I tell you that you have magic powers and you don't even want to test them? That's no fun at all.
Okay, fine.
She relented.
But just the bottle.
Of course.
Kris said.
What else?
She took a deep breath, preparing herself for what exactly?
So, how does this work?
Tension.
What?
Magical energy is generated by tension.
They explained.
That's why, in the Dark World, the spells come easiest after you strike a blow or brace yourself for an attack. or narrowly avoid getting hit by one due to your best magic when you're on edge. Should be a familiar feeling for you, right?
Noelle did feel a bit on edge, but only in the way she almost always did. It was hard to feel too tense out here in the beautiful woods on a peaceful fall morning. If Kris hadn't been there with her, she would have found it downright relaxing. But Kris was there, looking at her eagerly, expectantly.
Are you feeling tense, Noelle?
She gulped, took a deep breath.
Maybe a little.
Focus on the bottle.
Kris said, standing back to give her space.
Think about it turning to ice.
She tried, she really did. Tried to feel the cold inside her body, to visualize it bursting from her fingertips, affecting the object in front of her. She even put her arm out, gesturing like a kid playing make-believe, but nothing happened. After a moment, she began to feel stupid holding her arm outstretched like that. For all she knew, Kris was just playing an elaborate prank on her.
It's not working.
She pointed out in frustration.
I can't do it.
She wasn't sure if that made her feel disappointed or relieved. Kris hummed. They walked to her side and stood behind her shoulder, looking down her arm at the bottle.
Maybe you're not tense enough.
Or maybe I'm just not as good as this as you thought I'd be. Sorry to disappoint.
Her voice cut off mid-sentence as Kris wrapped an arm around her shoulders and pulled her back against their chest. Before she could open her mouth to protest, she felt something cold and pointy pressing under her chin, forcing her head back. She could hear the smile in Kris's voice next to her ear.
How about now?
Kris?
She squeaked in alarm.
What are you doing?
In human terms, getting your blood flowing.
They held the object in their hand out in front of her face so she could see it, and cold fear flooded her brain. A knife. And not some little pocket knife either, but a proper dagger with a hilt and thick grip and a double-edged blade.
Where the hell did they pull that from? Kris! Put that away!
She squirmed in their grasp, but they were stronger than she expected, pinning her against their body with just one arm like it was nothing.
Let me go!
I'll let you go once you've cast the spell.
Kris said calmly.
Come on, Noelle, you can do it.
They pressed the flat of the blade against her cheek, and she winced and tried to turn her head away.
Kris, stop! This isn't funny! You're really scaring me!
Don't focus on the fear.
They said.
Focus on the freeze. Think about the bottle frozen solid, and then channel all the tension and cold through your body and let it out.
I can't!
She cried, stinging tears blinding her vision.
You can. You're just blocking yourself out of fear. Do you want to be a weakling forever? If you were stronger, I wouldn't be able to do this to you. No one would be able to lay a hand on you if you didn't want them to.
The knife was against her throat now, not breaking the skin, but just firm enough to let her know it was there. She was hyperventilating and afraid to breathe at the same time. Her heart felt like it was trying to break through her ribcage.
You're too powerful to be this pathetic.
Kris continued.
Little Noelle, always jumping at the slightest sound, always afraid. Just a helpless baby doe. Someone's gonna skin you one day if you're not careful.
Through the heaving of her chest and the tightness of her throat, she forced out.
I'm not helpless.
Then prove it.
Kris said.
Because you're no good to anyone like this. Look at you, afraid to embrace what makes you special because you're scared you won't be able to control it. Well, guess what? You'll never control it if you don't try.
I am trying!
Noelle protested. Anger was welling up inside her, vying for dominance with the fear. She didn't have to let Kris push her around like this, didn't have to play their cruel games. How dare they make her do something she didn't want to do?
Try harder.
Kris ordered.
If you can't even protect yourself, then how are you going to protect your friends? You'll end up failing everyone you care about because you were too weak to be of any use. Just like you're failing your father. Just like you failed Death.
She yelled, and something more than just her voice burst out of her. Before she even realized what she was doing, a blast of cold energy flew in all directions, knocking Kris away from her. Noelle dropped to her knees, stunned by the force of the spell. Around her, in a circle, the twigs and leaves of the forest floor were frosted over. A low moan of pain came from behind her, and she twisted around to see Kris lying on their back, clutching their face in their hands and writhing on the ground.
Kris!
She screamed, scrambling to her feet and rushing over to kneel by their side.
Oh no! Oh no! 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 Did I hurt you?
Their clothes were covered in blue frost, as were their hands, and when they removed them from their face, Noelle gasped, covering her mouth in shock. But it wasn't just the raw red skin on the side of their face, glistening like a burn, that made her breath catch in her lungs. It was the expression on Kris's face, like nothing she'd ever seen there before. Fear and pain and a strange, remorseful recognition.
Noelle,
They whispered, voice weak and shaking.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to.
Shh.
She frantically tried to comfort them. Seeing them this way, sounding like a frightened kid again, their calm demeanor shattered, only made her panicked heartbeat flutter harder inside her chest.
Don't try to talk. It's okay. It's gonna be okay. I can fix this.
You don't understand.
Kris groaned, but Noelle wasn't listening. She was too busy trying to remember what to do. If she could use ice magic, however uncontrollably, then she ought to be able to use healing magic too. But her recollections of the dark world were still hazy, and everything had seemed to come more naturally there. It had been easy, effortless, when Kris had been telling her what to do, like she hadn't even had to think about it.
For angel's sake, Noelle!
She shouted at herself.
You can't afford not to know what you're doing right now. Stop overthinking and just do it!
She gently placed her hand on Kris's wounds, ignoring their gasp of pain, and tried to think healing thoughts. Wellness, vitality, pain receding, fading into nothingness, flesh knitting together, becoming whole again. She closed her eyes, and the face she saw swimming before her in her mind's eye wasn't Kris's anymore. It was her father, in his hospital bed, coughing so loudly that she thought he might die on the spot before the fit subsided and he put his usual brave face back on, turned to her with an embarrassed smile. A tear ran down her cheek, and when she blinked it away, her eyes opened to see Kris staring up at her, touching their face gingerly. The skin on their cheek, their hands, was smooth and undamaged. For a few stunned seconds, neither of them spoke, and then Kris propped themselves up on one elbow and said,
Well, I think it's safe to say you exceeded my expectations.
You're okay.
Noelle breathed, and then her face lit up and she pulled Kris into a tight hug.
I did it. I healed you. Thank the angel.
Yeah,
Kris wheezed, trying to extricate themselves from her too tight embrace.
you did good. Now if you could just let me breathe.
Suddenly recalling the circumstances that had led to that point, Noelle stopped hugging them and began shaking them by their shoulders.
What the hell were you thinking?
Kris grinned sheepishly.
That I could get you to freeze a bottle?
If she hadn't just healed Kris, Noelle could have strangled them.
So you thought it was all right to put a knife to my throat?
Noelle, come on. You don't really think I would have put you in any real danger, do you?
You terrified me. A knife isn't a toy, Kris.
I wasn't going to hurt you.
They insisted.
Look, I'll show you. Hang on. Where? Ah,
They spotted the knife where it had fallen to the ground nearby and walked over to pick it up.
watch.
She watched, shocked, as they rolled their sleeve up, extended their arm, and ran the knife down the length of their bare flesh. But when they had finished the gesture, there wasn't the burst of fresh red blood that she was expecting to see. Only a thin, pale white line. The knife hadn't even broken the skin,
See?
Kris said.
It's not even sharp, Noelle. I couldn't have cut you with this knife if I'd wanted to.
She stared at them, mouth agape.
Unbelievable. You stupid asshole!
A burble of stressed laughter burst from her mouth.
Next time I won't even bother to heal you.
No knives next time, I promise.
Kris smiled, and they had the decency to look a little abashed.
I think I may have overdone it a bit.
Noelle laughed again,
You think?
and then the laughter overwhelmed her. She couldn't stop. She laughed and laughed and laughed until her voice broke and her knees buckled under her, and she found herself hunched over on the forest floor, head down, sobbing and gasping for breath, her laughter having turned the corner to tears.
Hey,
Kris said.
hey, Noelle, it's okay.
They knelt by her, a hand touching her back through her sweater.
What's the matter?
You made me hurt you.
She sobbed.
You could have been killed and it would have been all my fault.
Hey, no, you fixed me though. No harm done. I'm stronger than I look. And apparently, so are you.
She took a great, shuddering breath and looked up at Kris, wiping tears from her eyes.
What good is it being strong if it gets people hurt?
You can control it.
Kris said seriously.
I'll help you. We can make sure you never have an accident like this again.
Noelle hesitated, focusing on her breath, on getting her heart rate down. She felt frayed and unmoored. The horror of the icy outburst, the relief and wonder of using healing magic. It was all too much. She didn't want to think about it right now, let alone figure out what to do with it all.
You're okay.
Kris told her, still gently rubbing her back.
I've got you. It's gonna be okay.
They said it with such certainty that she could almost believe it herself.
Can you just hold me for a minute?
She asked.
Just until I catch my breath.
Of course.
Kris said and sat down behind her, letting her lean back into their arms and rest her head against their shoulder.
Everything's alright now, Noelle. No hard feelings.
Kris began to lightly stroke her hair, and she closed her eyes and curled up into them, feeling tender and exhausted. The adrenaline and tears had left her, taking what felt like every last drop of energy in her body with them. And Kris was being so nice now, so gentle, so unlike the violent way they had held her earlier, and so unlike the scared, wounded kid she had healed. It was like they kept flipping a switch back and forth, from soft to scary, from confident to crumbling. The strange duality of Kris Dreamer frightened her, but who was she to judge? She wasn't half as scared of Kris as she was of herself. And that ends the chapter.
Up next, Chapter 5, Interlude. The Light Only You Can See.